And today is 12/16/14. Okay, so this we already talked about, species richness. Now we want to talk about one other characteristic of communities that we talk about in terms of species and sort of how many. I will shut up and let you copy. So we look at both how many species there are and how abundant they are, how many of them there are. So, for us, we say, yeah, deer, dime a dozen, lots of deer. They're very abundant. Bald eagles, not so much. Mottled sculpins, not so much. What about cottontail rabbits? Pretty abundant. Raccoons, pretty abundant. What about hellbenders? Not so much. They're pretty rare. Those are the 2-foot-long giant salamanders with a face so ugly we're even in doubt about how their mothers feel about looking at them. I mean, I'm sure their mothers love them, but they don't like to look at them. They're not much to look at. Those are pretty rare. When we look at species diversity, we look at not only just how many species there are, but how abundant those species are. So someplace that's got, 500 species, but there are very small numbers of each of them, is not as diverse as it could be. Now, here's the big interesting thing. Stability, resilience. What does it mean if you're stable? Zach, head up. What does it mean if you're stable?
You have your ground.
Okay, you got your ground. I like that. What else? Add to that.
You're resistant to change.
Not necessarily, but stable. You can recover from change. Stable. It's different in communities and people, but.
Your house is very stable.
Well, hopefully. We hope so. Okay, so stability, it means you can, if we say a person is stable, they're not liable to fly off the handle. This is not the person who's going to fly off the handle and scream at you because, you dropped a pencil. This is not the person who's unpredictable. So stability is this sort of level, this nice level. And in biological communities, stability does mean that the community resists change. Lots of forces change biological communities. Lots of things. Here's the interesting thing. The more species you have, the higher your species richness, the better you can resist change, and the better you can recover from change when it happens. Why do you think that is? So each one of those species in a community has its own little what? Niche. Could you have multiple species in a community that occupy similar niches?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And we talked about things like resource partitioning. Maybe they're each using part of the resource. We have competition going on. If you have one species that occupies its niche and something happens to that species, are other things affected? Yeah, significantly. If you have 10 species that are occupying similar niches and something happens to one of those species, is it as likely that other things will be affected? No. Because there are 9 more species that can come in and fill the parts of that species' niche. So the more diverse a community is, the better it can resist change, the more stable it is. And I think this goes for human communities too. Okay. When we take a biological community and we shake it up, because let's face it, life is all about disruption. Your life is disrupted constantly. We want this nice, steady, predictable existence, and life gets in the way. And things change, and we get curveballs thrown at us. And biological communities have the same thing. So we get changes to biological communities. Fires. Now, we don't have, forest fires are not something we deal with back here a lot. Out west, they're a big deal. One of the big disturbances we see to biological communities is logging. When you log a forest, is that a disturbance to the community? You bet. Yeah, you're removing a lot of individuals In some cases, you're removing all of a species, depending on how the logging is done. Flooding can be a disturbance. And if you look at, it's a little hard to snap. That doesn't increase the size for you. If you've ever been someplace where the forest has been flooded, flooding can kill trees because it drowns them. They have to exchange gas through their roots. If their roots are underwater, they can't do that, and they'll die. Volcanoes. There's one in Hawaii right now that's wiping out entire towns and roads and everything else. It's this slow-moving thing. Like, they know it's coming. They just, on the news this morning, were saying the grocery store is now emptying stock and preparing to evacuate and abandon. And it'll be covered with lava at some point.
That's their stupidity for having one close to volcanoes.
Pardon?
That's their stupidity for having.
Well, there have been people on those islands for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Those islands wouldn't be there except for volcanoes, you know. And the lava flow was not moving in that direction when they built it, I'm sure. I mean, the flow's been moving that direction for 20 years, but a lot of things have been around a lot longer than that. So, okay. When a community gets disturbed, when it gets shaken up, when it gets logged, this is a picture of after a forest fire. This is a flooded creek valley, and this is, you all recognize that. That's logging. That's after a place has been logged. We actually can look at that community and we know what stages it goes through in its recovery and coming back to where it was. I will read it as you copy and then I'll shut up. Succession is the gradual, so it's slow, and predictable. We can predict it. Change in a community as species either appear for the first time or regrow after it's been disturbed. And there are two kinds: primary succession, secondary succession. Record. Okay, so we just did a little bit of a mental exercise with thinking about what would happen if you didn't mow your lawn. Well, what's underneath your lawn? Dirt, soil. What if there was no soil?
Wouldn't grow.
Nothing grows. Nothing grows if there's no soil. So we're going to talk about primary succession first. And I'll read it to you, then I'll shut up while you copy. Primary succession is the process where a biological community forms where there was no life before. And we see this on volcanic islands. Here's a brand new baby volcanic island. We see it on places where there is bare rock. And we see it on sand dunes. So I will let you copy. Beautiful islands of Hawaii. Someday I'd love to go there and see them. At one point, they were just bare rock sticking up out of the ocean. Nothing on them. Nothing on them. Bare rock. If there is no soil whatsoever, nothing can grow. So a sand dune. What is the difference between soil and dirt? Or sand or rock? Yeah, soil, or we call it dirt a lot. Soil has got all kinds of other stuff in it. Soil's got little bits of dead bugs, it's got little bits of leaves, it's got organic matter, it's got nutrients that plants need. Just sand has none of that. Just rock has none of that. Nothing can grow on those things. So when we have bare rock, bare sand, brand new island, we go through this process of primary succession. Primary means what? First. Primary succession is the first life on this place. It's the very first time living things have been there. And how do we start off from bare rock to get to a biological community? Well, it takes time. I will read this to you and then I'll let you copy. Primary succession is very, very slow. This is because there's no soil, and therefore there are no nutrients for plants to grow. And I'll shut up for a little bit and then I'll read the second part to you. And then I'll shut up again. I'll read it and then I'll shut up. Secondary succession. So this is the second time life has come forth on this piece of ground. Is the process where a biological community regrows after it has been disturbed. And some of the examples are a forest after a forest fire, old farm fields, and vacant lots in cities. So when we just leave a biological community alone, it comes back. It takes a hit, it gets disturbed, it comes back. Question.
Evacuate a state for like 1,000 years and then go back to it.
None of us would be able to see it.
Well, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren would see it. Okay, so let's do a quick distinction. I'm going to read this to you, and then I'll shut up and let you copy. So if there was soil, secondary succession is where you had a biological community, there was soil, it got disturbed. Fire, flood, farm field, build a city on top of it. Beavers come in and they wreck the forest, whatever. That's secondary succession. If there is no soil whatsoever, that's primary succession.